Now that we have Active Directory set up and two 2019 core domain controllers set up, we want to set up a Windows 10 management workstation. And this is just a workstation where we can manage everything, all of our servers from a Windows 10 client. And first thing I want to do is sign in. And if you haven't given yourself a static IP, I would give yourself a static IP. Even though it's not going to be a server, it's just going to be a management workstation. You can lock it down, with different types of products and things. If you have a static IP and it's just a more secure connection, that way, if something goes crazy with the HCP or something, you still have a connection between your management workstation and, say, your core servers or your other servers out there on the network. So one of the first things I do, I'd open up Control Panel, go to Network and Sharing Center, and change adapter settings, double click, open my adapter properties, and double click TCP/IP version 4, and I'll give it a static address. So 192.168.70, I'm going to do 30, and a Class C subnet mask, that's fine, subnetting on 3 octets. My gateway, my router, 192.168.72, and preferred DNS server. In this case, my first domain controller, DC1, is 192.168, and they both have Active Directory integrated DNS. So when I say domain controller, I mean my DNS server. So my primary DNS server is going to be DC1, 192.168.70.15. And my secondary would be 192.168.70.16. And if you had a tertiary, you could go here and add a third. But I only have 2 in this instance. And we're just setting things up. So this will give me a static IP, and that just gives me a more stable connection. Since this is not a normal workstation, but this is it would be like a privileged access workstation. We want to make it more secure. We want to make it more stable. Something were to go crazy with the HCP, well, it's not going to affect us because we have a static IP. And that way we can still reach out and touch our servers and manage our servers and things. So it's just better to do that. And that's usually what I would start out doing on a management workstation. And having changed those IP settings, and so okay, I just want to make sure so DHCP is no longer enabled. I now have a static IP, and for my DNS servers, it's my Active Directory integrated DNS servers. In this case, my 2 2019 core domain controllers. Okay. Now the other thing I might want to do is change my host name and join the domain. So I'm going to do that. And an easy way to do that, we can go to Control Panel and Windows System Manager. So I'm going to do Control Panel, and I'm going to go to System, and I'm going to click on Change Settings, and I want to go with this here, Unicorn 01. So I'm going to change my computer name to Unicorn 01, and I want to join the domain in this case. So my domain is Skynet, skynet.ai. I'm going to click on OK. And I need an account with domain admin privileges, or at least privileges the ability to join a workstation to the domain. So in this case, I'm going to use a domain admin account I have in Skynet. And I'd specify the domain Skynet with a backslash, and then Twilight Sparkle is my domain admin. Okay, and then welcome to the Skynet domain. I click OK, and I'll need to reboot. I'm going to go ahead and reboot now. and I want to sign in. And now notice that I don't just have the option to sign in locally as Carly Solelli, but I can sign in as a domain user. I have Skynet users as well. So Twilight Sparkle's our new domain admin that we've hired to help us manage our Active Directory. So she's going to sign in. And let's look at configuring, what are the things that she would do to configure her management workstation to help her manage Active Directory. Okay, now that I've rebooted, notice I can choose other user, and now I have Skynet as an option. So Twilight Sparkle is our new domain admin, right? We've hired her to manage our Active Directory, and she needs to set up her management workstation to control everything. And now she has a static IP, and she has joined the domain. So what are some other things that she might do to set up her management workstation? And she might start by removing some of the default items that she doesn't need or doesn't want, unpinning them from the taskbar like Marketplace and a few other things. And then she might want to add some things, shortcuts or toolbars or whatnot. So in this instance, I'm just going to get a few commonly used items, and I just look for their location. And by the way, while I'm at it, well, from her point of view, right, from Twilight Sparkle's point of view, she's going to untick this option because I don't like the checkboxes. That just annoys me. It's a matter of preference, whatever. And I'm going to tick file name extensions. I like to see the extensions of files, and I like to see hidden items. So, you just want to customize your workstation to your own personal tastes. Whatever helps your workflow, whatever helps you be the most efficient, at your job. So, I'm going to choose a couple of these items here that I commonly use and throw them over here. Okay. And another thing that I commonly use is PowerShell. A lot of PowerShell. So I'm going to go find that location. And I'm going to choose ICE and the normal PowerShell. And we'll throw them over here. Okay. Just, common tasks, common things. And now that I have all the shortcuts set up, again, just make sure that our changes went through. So now we're Unicorn 01. And if I do a who am I, notice now I'm a domain account in a Twilight Sparkle. So this is her domain account. This is her management workstation. And the next thing I might do, Windows 10, I might upgrade Microsoft Edge, or install Chrome as a web browser, whatever your favorite browser tools are, the things that help you manage. So in this case, for me, it would be upgrading Edge and installing Chrome. And set up to Google. And set up Chrome. Okay, and then you will see user capital proxy. So I'm going to install Chrome. And I'm going to unlock the taskbar. And did I do that? Lock the, okay, all right. And there. And just move Chrome over. So now I have Chrome as a web browser. Another thing I usually do is I take ICE and I put it down here in the toolbar because I do PowerShell a lot. Okay? And another thing I like to do is make myself a custom toolbar. So I right click on the taskbar and I say new toolbar. And specifically the value that I want to use is %ProgramData%. And that's just wherever, your mileage may vary, your client settings may vary depending on how you set up Windows 10, but ProgramData, that environment variable, then Microsoft Windows Start Menu and Programs. And if I do this and click Select Folder, as a toolbar, what that does is, that kind of gives me that old familiar startup menu. And that's just, for me, that's way easier to find things. It's got all my programs, and honestly, guys, I cannot make sense of the new Windows 10 menu, this clunky alphabet soup looking Sesame Street. I guess I'm not I guess it's no secret that I'm not a great fan of this Windows 10 type menu here. It's just clunky, and you don't get a lot, you can't pack a lot of information in a small space. So I just make a little toolbar shortcut. And I find this very helpful. You may or may not, but I can get at all my programs and installed applications here, and the information is a lot more condensed in a smaller space. So I can kind of see and get to everything at one time, menus and submenus, and so forth, if that makes sense. Okay. So now what we need to do, we need to set up the ability to run PowerShell scripts. That's very important, and to manage Active Directory. So about that PowerShell, I need to launch either ICE or PowerShell as administrator, and I can do it from there on my desktop. I can do it from down here. If I right click, I can run as administrator too. Any way you want to do it, but you will need administrator privileges for this to set your management workstation. If you don't do this, you won't really be able to run any PowerShell scripts. And these days, you have to use PowerShell to manage Active Directory and Exchange and SharePoint and security and compliance and all this Azure and all those beautiful, wonderful Microsoft products and tools. Okay, so I'm in ICE now, and what I want to do, Get-ExecutionPolicy. And notice autocomplete there. That's one reason I like ICE. It's because of that IntelliSense, right? Or that autocomplete. And I can call it by itself, and notice that by default it's restricted. So I would not be allowed to run PowerShell scripts. If I tried to run a PowerShell script, it would give me an error, okay? So I need to change that. And in addition to Get-ExecutionPolicy, there's a list option, and that just gives you different scopes, right? You can set different settings on different scopes in your execution policy. But all I really need to do is set my execution policy, and that would be, right? And remember, when we talked about class hierarchies and accessor methods, every get has a set, every set has a get. Remember, PowerShell follows that example. There's a get to retrieve data, hidden or protected data members from a class object as a commandlet in PowerShell. Then there's also a set to set. So there's a set accessor, a get accessor. Anyway, tangent. So what I want to do, right? Set execution policy unrestricted. Okay. And then I'm going to say yes to all. And it's just warning you, hey, you can potentially, PowerShell's very immensely powerful, and you have to be careful, because you can do things that not only hurt your system, but can, destroy things in Active Directory or your entire network. So it's warning you, and there's a good reason why by default it's set to restricted. It's just sort of a lock, right, or a seal that's put on a new system, a new installation of Windows 10. So we just took that seal off, and we'll need that in the future when we use PowerShell scripts and things to manage different products, AD, Exchange, Azure, so forth. Okay, so, and if I were to list out, okay, so notice the local machine now is unrestricted. And I could change scope for any of these if I wanted to, but in this case, by default, all I really needed to set to unrestricted was the local machine. And that gives me what I need to run PowerShell scripts. And guys, I have a whole series of videos on ICE and going through and learning PowerShell and stuff like that. So if that's the direction you want to take, or if something you're interested in, go check out those playlists, the PowerShell playlist. I'll try to focus instead, this video is just on setting up a Windows 10 administrative client. All right, so that fixes this up for PowerShell. But now we need to be able to manage Active Directory, okay? And there's two tools we need, Windows Admin Center and we need RSAT tools. Both of those are very useful. And the way to get those, you just download them, okay? So I basically open the web browser and I'm gonna start out at Google. All right, so basically I just typed in download RSAT tools, okay? And you wanna make sure that you get a Microsoft website, all right? And be careful nobody's phishing you out there, but in this case, it looks like a legitimate Microsoft website. And remote server administration tools for Windows 10, right? So if you click download, and you got to choose one of these, but which do you choose? Well, you need to find your build number, your build number in Windows 10. And there's several ways to do that. You can get some information via your GUI. If you click on Control Panel right here, small icons, and I go to System, I can get some information. Here I know that I'm 64-bit, you know what I'm saying? I have a 64-bit, but what I want is my build number, Windows 10 education, but I want a little bit more information. So I'm gonna open a command prompt, and I'm just gonna do it administratively so there's no restrictions there, okay? And there's several ways to get this information. System info, and that will give me a lot of information if I call system info from the command prompt. But here's my host name, here's my build, 18362. So that's what I need to know, that I'm in that range, right? The 18 range is my build number. And there's other ways too. That's calling system info. I could also do wmic os get build number, all right, and that'll give me just the build number. That's less information, less bloated than system info. System info kind of is like hitting you in the face with a fire hose with way more information than you need. wmic os get build number, maybe a little bit, who knows. But if I wanted to, I could add more stuff in. I could use wmic 2 to get, let's say, caption, version, build number, OSArchitecture. All right, so I could get more information with wmic if I wanted to. All right, so that's 3 options, right, to get build information from your Windows 10. There's another way in PowerShell. If I type PowerShell, I can launch PowerShell right from within a command prompt. And now even though I'm in a command prompt, I'm nested inside that, I'm in a PowerShell prompt. And now I can use a commandlet, a PowerShell commandlet. So I can call Get-WmiObject, and then Win32 operating system is the particular attribute that I'm interested in. So Win32 operating system, and that too would give me the build number. So my goodness, there are 50 ways to leave your lover, and there might be as many ways to get the build information off your Windows 10 client. Who knows? Who knows? It's about the back, Jack. Make a new plan, Stan. You guys probably don't even have any idea what that song is. It's an old song I used to hear when I was okay, so I'm as old as dirt. And all right. So anyway, we know that we're in the 1800 range. So I know my bit architecture is 64-bit, right? So I know that the particular RSAT tools that I needed to download was this one. And I just check it and click next, and I've already downloaded it. Okay, I downloaded it and I threw it into a directory called software. And so there's my RSAT tools right there that I'll need to install to manage Active Directory on my Windows 10 workstation. There's a mouthful. And I downloaded Windows Admin Center 2. And it's deceptive that it says 2007, but that's actually the latest version of Admin Center. And to get Admin Center to download that, I just did the same thing I did to find RSAT tools. Opened up a web browser, and I typed in download RSAT tools. I do it from Google. Sometimes, have better luck. Make sure it's a legitimate Microsoft site, right? Make sure nobody's phishing you. download remote server administration tools, and download. And same thing, you've got to click your architecture, right? On my architecture, it's 64-bit, and I looked at my build number, right? It was 18 something. So I know that this was the one that I needed, and that was the one that I downloaded. Okay, so I grabbed both of those, and these are the tools I need to really manage Active Directory. These are, the whole point of having a Windows 10 management workstation is to have these two tools installed in it. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to install RSAT tools. So to install RSAT tools, I'm just going to double click on my installer. And do I want to install this update? Yes, because that's part of RSAT tools. Remote Server Administration Tools, or RSAT tools. I accept. Don't read that fine print. All that stuff about contract in blood, selling your soul to Microsoft, your firstborn child. Hey, don't worry about that. Just click I accept. It's all good, right? Okay, installation complete. And let's verify that by going into Control Panel and Administrative Tools. Well, I had an Administrative Tools shortcut on the desktop, but look, here are all those Active Directory tools that we need. And some of the most important ones are ADAC, Active Directory Administrative Center, ADUC, Active Directory Users and Computers, and a couple other ones, maybe DNS. Just some of those AD tools here. Domains and trust and sites and services we'd also use, but I'm going to make shortcuts to these guys, and we'll take a look at them. All right, so here's my RSAT tools. Very important, probably the most important set of tools for managing Active Directory on a Windows workstation. I'm just going to give them shorter names. I'm going to call that ADAC, Active Directory Administration Center. I'm going to call this ADUC, Active Directory Users and Computers. So I'm on a Windows 10 management workstation, but now look, I have access to Active Directory. If I open ADUC, look, here's Skynet. Here are my users, right? There's Twilight Sparkle, our domain admin. And I can access her account. All those things. I can use ADAC on my management workstation. And if I want to go in and just do a global search here. Let's look for Twilight. Hey, where's Twilight? Look, there's Twilight. And now I can open her account, right? And access all types of attributes and features of her account. Okay. And I could even access DNS if I want to from my Windows 10 workstation. Now, my computer is not a DNS server, so I'd want one of my Active Directory integrated DNS servers. In this case, it's those two 2019 core servers that we set up to be Domain Controller 1 and Domain Controller 2. So the first one was T3000 DC1. And if I want to, look, now I can manage DNS from my Windows 10 workstation. Let's add another. Connect to DNS server. I'm going to add T3000 DC2. Same thing. And now I can look at the zone information. Here's my A records and forward lookup, my pointer records if I had any, reverse lookup and SRV records and so forth. So probably the most important thing to install would be RSAT tools to be able to manage Active Directory from your Windows 10 workstation. But another very powerful and second only to RSAT tools, another very powerful tool would be the Windows Admin Center. And again, that 2007, it's a bit deceptive. That's actually, for me, the latest Admin Center. So that MSI, I'm going to install that now. I accept the terms. Don't read the fine print, right? Don't want to know. You're selling your soul. All right, I click next, and I'm going to go with the defaults, and I'm going to say yes. And this basically runs, you know, from within a web browser. That's how the interface is accessed. But it gives you some similar functionality to RSAT tools. I would say not as powerful, not as useful for Active Directory. The ultimate core tools to manage Active Directory, you need RSAT tools on your Windows 10 management workstation. But after RSAT tools, Windows Admin Center is pretty awesome. Okay, and I'm going to take open Windows Admin Center, and I'm going to want to make a shortcut to it and bookmark it, because I have a horrible memory. So I click Finish, and I'm going to choose Google Chrome. That is my instrument of choice to open these sorts of things. And select a certificate to authenticate yourself. I'm going to use the built-in certificate there. Just the easiest. Okay, notice it's loading, all right, and it's localhost, and it's on port 6516 because those are the defaults we accepted when we installed, right? And I'm gonna bookmark this, make it easy to find, and we're going to load Windows Admin Center now up in our web browser, and I just want to add my servers, and in this case, we just set up Active Directory on our two 2019 core servers. We just set them up as domain controllers. So I want to add them in. So I'm going to click Add to add the servers. And I just need to know their host names, T3000, DC1. And Windows Admin Center will search it. It found it. And add server name exactly as entered. Alright, so I'm just going to use the host name. And I'm going to add my second domain controller as well. So that was DC1. This is T3000 DC2. And I'll add it just by its host name. So now I've got my servers here in Windows Admin Center to manage. And I'm going to select, in this case, my first domain controller. And notice when I do, all of this information that I get. So here's an overview of my server. And I have access to all of these different tools here. And I can remote desktop, I can create a remote PowerShell session, roles and features, even though it's a core server. So it doesn't have desktop experience, doesn't really have a graphical interface to it. I can manage it as though it did. And the cool thing about a setup like this, where your domain controllers and your other servers are core servers, all they have to do is worry about serving out whatever services they need to offer on your network. So they consume less resources, less memory, less CPU cycles, less I/O on the storage. Additionally, it's a smaller attack surface, so it's less for a potential hacker to attack. And you could argue that the responsibility of providing a rich graphical interface, that belongs on a client like Windows 10 or a 2019 management workstation. It doesn't belong on a server or a domain controller. The domain controller should not be taxed with having to provide you with a rich graphical interface, okay? They have more important things to do on your network. So that's sort of the strategy or sort of the idea behind a core server setup, and then setting up, in this case, a Windows 10 graphical management workstation, or you could even set up a 2019 server graphical management workstation. But the idea is that they're either a workstation or just a member server. They're not a functional server like a domain controller or Exchange or something, because those servers they need all their resources to serve out all the services that they have to provide. They shouldn't have to tax themselves with, providing you with the graphical interface. That's the job of your client. And so that's something that RSAT tools and Windows Admin Center do very well when installed on a workstation or client. If I wanted to, look, I could click on Files. I can graphically access the file system on my domain controller, okay? Processes, remote registry access, roles and features. If I wanted to add roles and features, say I wanted to set up DHCP or something, I can install any of those here from within roles and features. Scheduled tasks, services.msc, just as if I were running it from the GUI. Well, I can access those services remotely in Windows Admin Center. See? Pretty cool, huh? And updates, Windows Update. Yeah, sure, I could sign into my, my core 2019 core servers, and I could use the sconfig tool and manage updates that way if I had to, but look, this gives me a graphical, GUI, very convenient, cool way to manage my updates. And this way, the work of providing that graphical goodness, all that GUI graphical goodness, it falls on my client. It taxes my client, but doesn't tax my domain controllers or my servers. So again, that's the idea behind that strategy. And it's much more secure, I have all these extra resources, things on my client, on my management client, but they're not on my server. So my server has a much smaller attack surface. And I'll show you a couple other cool things. There's RDP built in. So if I wanted to do a remote desktop connection, I could. And I'm going to go ahead and go with that certificate, and I'll use my domain name in this case. That's fine. Okay, I'm going to connect this Twilight Sparkle, right? She's our domain admin, so she has privileges to sign into our servers. She can get in there if she wants to. All right, so now look where I am. If I do a host name, that's T3000 DC1, right? And who am I? On this machine, Skynet. There's my Active Directory account and Twilight Sparkle. And I could, I could access my file system. I could run PowerShell. I could do all kinds of things. PowerShell. All right. So anything, granted, it's a command prompt because it's a core server. It's not a graphical or not a server with desktop experience, but it's kind of convenient to have RDP and remote PowerShell access to any of my servers through a centralized management tool, Windows Admin Center. That's the power of it. It's the fact that it centralizes everything. I'm going to exit out of the RDP session. Alrighty. And disconnect. And I'm going to go to PowerShell. Watch this. Again, if I wanted to open a remote PowerShell session, which is something that's very common, I can manage my servers remotely. I now have, I can just click on a server and click on PowerShell, and boom, I have an instantaneous remote connection to that server to run my scripts on and run PowerShell on. Isn't that cool? And if I wanted to run ICE, I could just type in ISC and run ICE on that machine. Very, very cool to have all of that in one place. And I'm just trying to give you a broad overview. Look, local users and groups. Now, here's the thing. On a domain controller, do you have that? No. Remember when you set up Active Directory, you can no longer log in locally on that server. You can only log into Active Directory, and you no longer have local users and groups. You have Active Directory users and groups. And we can access those with RSAT tools. Local firewall settings. Okay. And event viewer. If I wanted to get out my logs, my system logs, let's say I wanted to check security logs for failed logins or something. I can access all that remotely through Windows Admin Center. My devices, my certificates. If I was in hybrid mode or I had ADFS synchronizing with Azure, I could access all sorts of Azure things up here. And let me show you one more cool thing. Windows updates, graphical Windows updates. Oh, I think I already said that. Sorry, I can't even remember what I talked about 5 minutes ago. Alzheimer's. Okay. Let me show you one more cool thing. If I click on settings over here, and I want to go to extensions, and notice this extension here, Active Directory. Yeah, select that and install that, okay? So I'm going to install that extension. I'm going to say yes. Okay, and it's installing, and it's successfully installed, and now it has to reload itself. And now if I click on installed extensions, there's Active Directory, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to close down Windows Admin Center just to renew and refresh everything. And I haven't done it yet. I bookmarked it, but I'll tell you what else I'm going to do. I'm going to create a shortcut, because it's such a powerful tool and something that you use so frequently. And so here, what I want to copy, and I'm just going to make myself a shortcut, a new, and a shortcut, and the location of the item is just localhost 6516 is the port, and I'm going to call this dyslexia. That's what I'm going to call it. Windows Admin Center. I couldn't type straight if my life depended on it. The characters are always jumbled. All right, and that just serves as a nice way to launch Windows Admin Center. So I have it here, but conveniently right here with my RSAT tools. Now I can click on Windows Admin Center and load that up. Okay, so anyway, back to that extension, right? That Active Directory extension. Now with it installed, I can click on one of my servers, and voila. Now I have, this wasn't there before, but now I have Active Directory. Now, again, to manage all of the Active Directory services and features and roles, you need RSAT tools. Do you ever need RSAT tools? But this is sort of in development. It's sort of still being baked or baking in the oven, but there's some pretty cool things here. Okay. Look at the things that I can browse. NTDS quotas. Don't know why I picked that, just at random, but all right, so overview. I can search AD. If I want to create a user group OU. So that gives me some very basic functionality. Nowhere near the level of RSAT tools, but this is still baking. It's in the oven. They're working on it. So I can imagine eventually this will be an incredibly robust extension, or maybe even added by default into Windows Admin Center. So just sort of a brief overview of the Admin Center bit, and then whatever other things you might customize on your desktop. But these are just some of the things that I would do on a typical Windows 10 management workstation to help me manage and control Active Directory and my other servers.